Alright, hey, greetings everybody, and welcome back to another session of Biblical Studies with the Moonlight Marauder. We set these short biblical studies or short teaching sessions up for, they're primarily designed for people who love God but just can't get into the traditional denominational churches type thing. We want to make the Bible as easy as possible for someone to understand, because the better we understand the Bible, the more the blessings we can get out of it. And with that in mind, let's see what we've got here. Greetings, my friends. In this session, I think we'll take a look at Samson, the one of the greatest judges of Israel, I think. And he's the last judge of Israel, and he has the most print written about him, in 4 full chapters. And I think we'll start here in chapter 13, verse 1. And it says, "Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Now, I need to stress this, that this is a figure of speech. I believe it's called an idiom of permission. And that's where God takes the blame for what the devil does. God didn't just grab Israel up and say, hey, you're going to worship other gods, I'm going to give you to the bad guys. He just didn't do that. When they turned, or even today, when we turn away from God, He can't protect us anymore. He has to back away. He wants to, but He just can't. And that's what happened over here with Israel and the Philistines. God wanted to protect them. He just couldn't. So the adversary stepped in and took them over. Okay, now in chapter 14, verse 1, it states, Samson went down to Timnah and saw there was a young Philistine woman. Now, when I first read over that, I had the impression that Samson went down to Timnah to get himself a Philistine woman. That's not the case. Samson went down to Timnah to pick a fight with the Philistines. And there in Timnah, he saw a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. A point here, too, back in those days, the women really didn't, and I kind of like those days. The women really didn't have a choice. You go down there, and it's kind of like you go to the grocery store and you pick your favorite fruit or something. You go down there, you see a woman, I like her, I want her for my wife. She doesn't have anything to say about this. And so I bring a dowry. Maybe I bring him a couple of sheep and a humpy-back camel, and he's happy. The father-in-law is happy with it, so he gives the daughter to me in marriage. That's how that works. But the whole thing is handled between the parents. All right. Now in verse 3, his father and mother replied, "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives, or among our people, that you must go to the uncircumcised Philistines and get a wife?" Now here, because Samson is looking towards this Philistine woman. What's actually going on in the background is God is working in Samson, so the Israelites will be able to confront the Philistines. And I'm going to jump way to the end here for a second. Most of us know that Samson was killed when he brought down the pillars of the temple on top of I think it was 3,000 Philistines. I'm not sure. And in doing so, those 3,000 Philistines were the leaders of the country. They were the elite, the honchos, the guys who gave the orders. And when he brought those pillars down on top of the Philistines, that opened the way where the Philistines were in confusion, and Israel was able to rise up and confront them. Okay, back over here. Let's see, verse 3. His father and mother replied, "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife?" But Samson said to his father, "Get her for me. She's right for me." His parents didn't know this. Wait a minute. I got to quit laughing. His parents didn't know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. For at that time they were ruling over Israel. thing to understand about that is when the Philistines ruled over you, it wasn't just you had to obey their laws or anything. If you had a farm and you had a plow animal, an oxen, and you had a nice plow, the Philistines come walking by, because they ruled over you, they would say, "Hey, I like that oxen. I like that plow. I'm going to take it. What you got in your house? You got any food in here? I'll take that too." And you couldn't say anything about it if you wanted to stay healthy. So it was a real dictatorship. Now in verse 5, Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, and I'm trying to figure out where that is, but anyway, as they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards Samson. All right, now, the adversary, when Samson was going down there, the adversary had Samson in his sights. And how we can pick that up is in 1 Peter. Let's see, it's 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. It says, "Be sober, be vigilant. Your adversary, the devil, is as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour." And this was a young lion, came roaring at him. However, it didn't work out very well. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him and came upon Samson in power, that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, that he might have torn a young goat. But he didn't tell. He told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her. Okay, so point here is he didn't think it was a real big deal that he ripped the lion apart with his bare hands. The lion charged at him. He got him where the hairs were short and ripped him to pieces. And that wasn't any big deal to him. To any of us, that'd be pretty big. That'd be big to me. All right. Sometime later, when Samson went back to marry the Philistine woman, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass. In it was a swarm of bees and some honey, which he scooped out with his hands and ate it as he went along. When he joined his parents, he gave them some, and they ate it too. But he did not tell them he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. They still don't know. They still don't know that Samson killed a lion with his bare hands. Now, a lion comes jumping out of the woods or comes running at me roaring, I'm going to freak out. But Samson, he had the Holy Spirit in him, and the lion jumped on him. Samson grabbed him by the jelly beans and ripped him a new one. So now his father went down to see the woman, that's the Philistine woman, and Samson made a feast there, as was customary for the bridegrooms. When he appeared, he was given 30 companions. I think that's the companions, to the best of my knowledge. Those are the wedding party. I think that's what that would be. I'm not really sure, but I think I'm right. And then Samson said, "Let me tell you a riddle." Samson told him. He said, "If you can give me the answer within 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes." Now, Samson knew the Philistines they were honor bound to answer that riddle. If they didn't, it would be a great embarrassment to them. I don't know how serious the matter was, but it's a big deal if they can't answer the riddle. They don't want to show their face in public. So they said, "Tell us your riddle." They said, "Let's hear it." He replied, "Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet." And then so for 3 days, they could not give Samson his answer. On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to rob us? In other words, they were asking her or accusing her of inviting them to this wedding so that Samson could pull a charade on them and make them look bad. And I think we're kind of thinking when they say 30 changes of clothes, that'd be like suits. $1,000 suits. So today we might be talking about $30,000. Anyhow, they said they threatened to burn her household down. And they told her, "Did you invite us here to rob us?" Then Samson's wife threw herself on him, and sobbing, and she said, "You hate me. You don't really love me." And this is something Delilah said the same thing. "You hate me, and you don't really love me." This is something we'll see later on down the road here. You hate me, you don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. Now you see here, Samson's wife is trying to protect her family. I mean, they're going to come and burn a whole lot of them, set them on fire, and it's going to be quite a barbecue, and I wouldn't want to be part of it. And she says, Samson says, "I haven't even explained it to my father and mother," he replied, "so why should I explain it to you?" She cried the whole 7 days of the feast, so on the 7th day, he finally told her, because she continued to press him. And he in turn explained the riddle to her, and she went and ratted him out to the to the Philistines. Okay, guys. Now in chapter 14, verse 18, it says, "Before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town went to Samson, and they told him the riddle. They said, 'What is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion?'" Now, they waited to the very last minute on the 7th day in order to make this bet as painful as possible for Samson. And then Samson replied to them, "If you had not plowed my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." Now, in biblical times, women were referred to as cows. Older women were cows. Younger women were heifers. That kind of threw me a little bit when I first read that. If I plowed my heifer, hey, oh yeah. Anyway, then in verse 19 says, "Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson in power. He went down to Ashkelon and struck down 30 of their men and stripped them of their belongings and gave their clothes to those who explained the riddle." Now, there's a reason that Samson went to Ashkelon. Ashkelon is one of the 5 capital cities of Philistine, and he's always trying to strike at the heart of the Philistines, and in order to get them out of the occupation of his country. Anyhow, so he can get the guys that are now burning with anger, and we're still in verse 19. Burning with anger, he went up to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to a friend who had attended him at his wedding. Samson didn't know about this, so you can imagine how he felt betrayed. Okay, now keep in mind that Samson didn't know about this betrayal. He didn't know that the father-in-law had given his wife away to another guy. So, in chapter 15, verse 1 states, "Later on at that time of the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. He said, 'I'm going to my wife's room,' but her father wouldn't let him go in." In verse 2, it says, "I was sure you thoroughly hated her," he said, "and that I gave her to your friend. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead." Now Daddy-in-law here is trying to appease Samson's anger, so Samson doesn't get upset and rip his head off and take a little tinkle down his neck. So he's offering his more attractive daughter. All right. In verse 3, Samson said to them, "This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them." So he went out and caught 300 jackals and tied them tail to tail in pairs. Then he fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and set the jackals loose in the standing grain of the Philistines. He burned up the shocks, the standing grain, together with the vineyards and the olive groves. See, what had happened is, it is kind of funny that maybe, but the jackals are they're trying to outrun the fire, and they're running in several different directions. And in the panic, they wandered off into the vineyards and the olive groves and burnt those up as well. So when the Philistines, in verse 6, 15:6, when the Philistines asked who did this, they were told Samson, the Timonite's son-in-law, because his wife was given to a friend. So the Philistines went up and burned her and her father to death. Samson said to them, "Since you have acted like this, I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." And he attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. Then he went and stayed in a cave in a rock at Edom. I don't know where Edom is. I think we can find it on a map. But the thing we need to understand here in verse 7, why they burnt the father-in-laws and burnt these guys alive, is they were really ticked off. Samson put a serious dent in their food supply, and all the hard work they put into it just went up in smoke. Now in verse 9 of chapter 15, it states, "The Philistine went up and camped in Judah, spreading out near Lehi. The men of Judah asked, 'Why have you come to fight us?' 'We've come to take Samson prisoner,' they answered, 'to do to him what he did to us.'" Now, then there were, you got 3,000 of them. Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cave in the rock of Edom, and said to Samson, "Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What have you done to us?" Now, God was supposed to be the ruler over them. They kind of ignored him, turned away, and that's why they're in this mess, and that's why the Philistines are all over them. Anyway, they go back and they said, "The Philistines are rulers over us. What have you done to us?" And he answered, "I merely did to them what they did to me." They said, "We've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." Now you think over here, Samson said, "Swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves." And they said, and they agreed. They said, "Agreed," they answered. The reason Samson agreed to being tied up is he didn't want to kill 3,000 Judeans. They were his people, and they were part of the Israelites. So they said, "We agree, and we will only tie you up and hand you over to them. We will not kill you." So they bound him with 2 new ropes and led him up from the rock. As he approached Lehi, the Philistines came toward him, shouting. Now this shouting thing is not saying, "Welcome, Samson, it's good to see you." No, that's a battle cry. They were getting pretty hairy here. Anyway, they came running at Samson, shouting. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, and the binding dropped from his hands. Finding the fresh jawbone of my third stepmother, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Oh, wait a minute. That was the jawbone of an ass. I got confused, you guys. My third stepmother. I don't think she was around back then. Anyhow, I'll read this properly. Finding the fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Now, bear in mind, in order for there to be a donkey or an ass, for there to be a fresh jawbone, it means they had a freshly killed animal. And that was probably because the Philistines, who were marauding and destroying everything in the area, killed the donkey or the ass. And you can say ass, it's in the Bible. They probably killed it. That's why Samson was able to get a hold of a fresh jawbone. Okay, there are a couple of things I'd like to point out here. There were 3,000 men of Judah went down to capture Samson. Now, if you think about it, these guys were really cowards. They didn't have the Babylons to stand up to the Philistines. For example, take Gideon. Gideon only had 300 men, and he went up against 145,000 and defeated them because he had God on his side. These Judeans, if they had their thoughts together, they realized there's 3,000 of them. There is Samson, and most importantly, there is God himself would be on their side. But no, these guys, they didn't have the dingleberries to go and do what was supposed to be done. Now, we were talking about the jawbone of an ass, not my stepmother, an ass, or a donkey, if you will, and it was a freshly killed animal. What was happening during that thing? When the Philistines came in to the territory, they weren't just marching through and being real friendly. Hi, how you doing there, Judas guy, Judean guy? No, they were killing, burning, raping, and because they could, they were their masters. And I don't know. That's why they had the fresh jawbone of a donkey. These guys were not nice people. Okay. Then another thing about the jawbone of a donkey, an ass. You can say ass. Ass is in the Bible. I told you so. But it's interesting because pound for pound, the jawbone is the strongest bone in the body, and it still had teeth in it, which made it an excellent weapon. Now we're going to, as we're going down here in verse 16, chapter 15, verse 16, we're going to start to see some of Samson's humor. Then Samson said, "With a donkey's jawbone, I've made donkeys of all of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I've killed 1,000 men." Now, in the King James version, with an ass's jawbone, I've made asses of them. With an ass's jawbone, I've killed 1,000 men. I like that version better. Anyhow, now in verse 17, when he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone, and the place was called, it's going to Ramath Lehi, which means Jawbone Hill. Because he was very thirsty, he cried out to the Lord, "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" This also, when you look at this verse, he cried out to the Lord. Samson is still keeping God in his mind, which I think is kind of cool. All right, now in verse 19, then God opened up the hollow place in Lehi, and the water came out of it. When Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. So at that time the spring was called En-Hakkore, Hakkore, En-Hakkore, and is still there to this day in Levi. Now the Hebrew meaning of the words En-Hakkore, it means the caller's spring. Samson called and the water came up. And then it goes on in verse 20, Samson led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Okay, guys, here in chapter 16, it states that one day Samson went to the Philistine city of Gaza and spent the night with a prostitute. We're going to find that his lack of moral strength is going to lead to his downfall. All right, now in verse 2, the word soon spread that Samson was there, so the men of Gaza gathered together and waited all night at the city gates. They kept quiet during the night, saying to themselves, "When the light of morning comes, we'll kill him." But Samson stayed in bed only until midnight. Then he got up and took hold of the city gates with the two posts and lifted them, bar and all, right out of the ground. He put them on his shoulders and carried them all the way to the top of the hill across Hebron. Now this is several miles that he carried these gates, and these gates weighed a couple of tons. So that's quite a feat. And the reason he brought them to Hebron is he's trying to show the Israelites that the Philistines are vulnerable, they can be gotten, and that, let's go get them. But as we'll see, that didn't work out. All right, now here in chapter 16 in verse 4, we're going to get into the Samson and Delilah story. And verse 4 starts out, "Later Samson fell in love with a woman named Delilah, who lived in the valley of Sorek. The leaders of the Philistines went to her and said, 'Find out from Samson what makes him so strong and how he can be overpowered and tied up securely. Then each of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver.' Since there are 5 capitals, that means there were 5 leaders from these capitals came down. So that 5 times 11 is 1100 is 5,500 pieces of silver. That's a lot of bread, Fred. So Delilah, in verse 6, Delilah said to Samson, "Please tell me what makes you so strong, and what it would take to tie you up securely." Now, what Samson should have done here was told her to mind her own business, and then kind of reminds me of the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, when Eve picked the forbidden fruit and they gave it to Adam. That's how this will tell you how women got their name. She offered it to Adam, and Adam took a bite, and God's sitting up there, goes, "Whoa, man, what are you guys doing?" And so that's my understanding. That's how women are called women. Whoa, man, or woe unto man. Okay, just kidding. Anyway. But Delilah's setting him up when she says, "Please tell me what makes you so strong and what it takes to tie you up securely." Samson replied, now he's setting up a practical joke here. He's figuring he's going to tell her something, and if it backfires, he's going to be able to whip a couple of Philistine behinds. So here we go. It says, Samson replied, "If I am tied up with 7 bowstrings that have not been yet dried, I will be as weak as anyone else." So the Philistine leaders brought Delilah 7 new bowstrings, and she tied Samson up with them. She had hidden some of the men in one of the rooms in her house, and she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." But Samson snapped the bowstrings as if they were a string that had been burnt in a fire. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Now I can imagine the shock on the Philistine faces when Samson snapped those bowstrings and started whooping them. So the secret of his strength was not discovered, not at this time. Then in verse 10, afterward Delilah said to him, "You've made fun of me and told me a lie. Now please tell me how you can be tied up securely." Samson replied, and he's clowning around again, "If I am tied up with brand new ropes that have never been used, I will be as weak as anyone else." So Delilah took the new ropes, tied him up with them. Then the men were hiding in the it's going to get funny. She took the new ropes and tied him up with them. The men who were hiding in the room as before, again Delilah cried out, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." And then I can imagine the 3 stooges coming out of there, and Samson jumps up and snapped the ropes from his arms as if they were thread. I can imagine the looks on their faces. You come up there, "Oh no, we're going to get another ass whipping." I can say ass. Ass is in the Bible. Then Delilah said, "You have been making fun of me and telling me lies. Won't you please tell me how you can be tied up?" Samson replied, I would dump this wench if I were him. Obviously, she doesn't have his best interest in mind. I don't know what he must really have been love struck. Anyway, Samson replied in verse 13. Samson replied, "If you weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric of your loom and tighten it with the loom shuttle, I'll be as weak as anyone else." So while he slept, Delilah wove the 7 braids of his hair into the fabric into the fabric and tightened it with the loom shuttle. Again she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." But Samson woke up and pulled the rack of the shuttle of the loom and yanked his hair away from the loom and the fabric. You would think these Philistine guys, you'd think they'd learn. I can see him coming out of the hidden room there, because he's got his hair all in the loom, and they're coming out to secure Samson. And there he is. He pulls his hair out of the loom. I can see one turning the other, saying, "Oh man, we're gonna get another butt whipping." Oh brother. Anyway, all right, guys. In verse 15 of chapter 16, It states, Delilah pouted, and she said, how can you say you love me when you don't confide in me? You've made fun of me 3 times now, and you still haven't told me what makes you so strong. So day after day she nagged him until he couldn't stand it any longer. Finally Samson told her his secret. My hair has never been cut, he confessed, for I was dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me and I would become weak as anyone else. Delilah realized he had finally told her the truth, so she sent for the Philistine leaders. Come back one more time, she said, for he has told me everything. So the Philistine leaders returned and brought the money with them. Delilah lulled Samson to sleep with his head in her lap, and she called in a man to shave off his hair, making his capture certain. And his strength left him. She cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. When he woke up, he thought, I will do as before and shake myself free. But he didn't realize the Lord had left him. And I want to stop it. The Lord left him because Samson broke his vow. It wasn't the hair was important, but everything else he's done was he had a covenant with God and he broke it. All right, so, but he didn't realize the Lord had left him. In verse 21, so the Philistines captured him and gouged out his eyes. Now, they would do that immediately. The reason you gouge out Samson's eyes is you want to make sure if his strength comes back, they gouged his eyes out. So if he can't see them, he can't hurt them, he can't find them, they can stay out of his way. Okay, so the Philistines captured him and gouged out his eyes. They took him to Gaza, where he was bound with bronze chains and made to grind grain in the prison. Now that's an insult. They had him grinding grain to insult him, because grinding grain is a woman's job. But before long his hair began to grow back. Aha. Okay, verse 23, we're coming to Samson's final victory. And in verse 23 it states, the Philistine leaders held a great festival, offering sacrifices and praising their god Dagon. They said, our God has given us victory over the enemy Samson. That's just not true. Their God didn't give him diddly squat. Samson's downfall was his own fault, because he broke his covenant with God. Now in verse 24, when the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, oh, our God has delivered our enemy to us. The one who killed so many of us is now in our power. Half drunk by now, the people demanded, bring out Samson so that he may entertain us. At this point, I should tell you, the word entertain in Hebrew has sexual connotations. In other words, Samson was sexually abused. All right, moving right along here. So he was brought out from the prison and made to stand at the center of the temple, between the 2 pillars supporting the roof. Samson said to the servant who was leading him by the hand, place my hands against the pillars. I want to rest against them. The temple was completely filled with people. And this is important, pay attention. All the Philistine leaders were there. And there were about 3,000 of them up on the roof watching Samson and making fun of him. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, O sovereign Lord, remember me again, O God. Please strengthen me one more time, so that I may pay back the Philistines for the loss of my eyes. Then Samson put his hands on the center pillars of the temple and pushed against them with all his might. Let me die with the Philistines, he prayed. Then the temple crashed down on the Philistine and all the Philistine leaders and all the people. So he killed more people when he died than he did during his lifetime. Later on, they talked about leaders here. What he did here when he brought down the temple was all of the leadership from all the capital cities was there. They wanted to have a little fun with Samson. And he brought the temple down on them and killed a whole lot of them. That means there was a leadership vacuum in the Philistine country. And hopefully Israel could have taken an opportunity and rose up and conquered them, drove them out of their country. Now in verse 31, it says, Later, his brothers and other relatives went down to get his body. They took him home and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol, where his father Manoah was buried. Samson had been Israel's judge for 20 years. This is kind of a hypocritical part on his family, because when he was trying to liberate Israel and in his own way, they didn't want anything to do with him. They didn't help him. They didn't assist him. They didn't encourage him. So I find this as a bit of a hypocrisy. Also, guys, I think I have some interesting facts here I should share with you about Samson. To start off with, Samson was sort of a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ for the following reasons. I have reason number one. An angel of the Lord announced the birth to both the mothers of Samson and Jesus Christ. Samson, it's recorded for him. It's recorded in Judges chapter 13, verse 3. And Jesus Christ is recorded in Luke chapter 1, verse 26, when the angel announces to her that she's going to have a child. Number two, second reason, Samson began to deliver God's people. Jesus began to deliver God's people and will finish the job at the second coming. And then the number three, God was the one who stirred Samson to move against the Philistines, the enemy of God's people, and God was also the one who stirred Jesus after he got baptized and received the Holy Spirit, was led off to the desert to do battle with the devil for 40 days. Number four, the people around Samson didn't understand his ministry. Same problem Jesus had. The people around him didn't understand his ministry either. And another coincidence here in number five is they both died in a cross position with their arms out and their feet down. I found that interesting. Now, also, Samson seems to get a negative reputation for having a lustful desire for women and revenge. I don't believe it's fair I don't believe it's fair to Samson, since he paid a terrible price in the service of the Lord. He not only lost his life, he was blinded and tortured by the Philistines. Before anyone, and I feel this personally, before anyone comes down on Samson for sinful behavior, remember King David, the greatest king that Israel ever had, was a murderer and an adulterer at one time. Yet he was, like I said before, the greatest king of all Israel. Now we have King Solomon. King Solomon worshipped pagan gods and allowed child sacrifice. Solomon also had 700 wives and 300 concubines. The law of Moses says the kings are not to have many wives. I think Samson overdid that a little bit. Now, the point is, God has to work with sinful people. In Romans 3:23 says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Samson was no exception. And also we should point out that Samson had more written about him than any other of the judges. He had 4 full chapters about him in the book of Judges. And I think that says something for him. So I think that pretty much covers what I wanted to share with you about Samson tonight. So I will just say I wish you God's best. And I also advise you, do what the Word of God tells you, not what the marauder does. He's got enough explaining to do with the judgment. With that in mind, or that being said, this is the Moonlight Marauder, and I'm back out. God bless you guys.